No, this cannot be happening!
The entire restaurant went silent when the billionaire's daughter suddenly stood on a chair, knocked a glass from the table, and screamed as if she were fighting something no one else could see. 3 security guards rushed toward her. 2 nurses had already failed to calm her that afternoon. Her father's personal assistant froze near the entrance, terrified of making another mistake. Then a young waitress walked toward the girl carrying nothing but a glass of water and the quiet confidence of someone who had learned what it meant to be ignored. Nobody knew that within the next few minutes, she would do something that doctors, teachers, therapists, and an entire team of professionals had failed to accomplish for years. Before we continue, if you believe kindness can change a life and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories like this to you. The story began in Boston, Massachusetts, inside one of the city's most expensive restaurants, a place where wealthy businessmen quietly discuss million-dollar deals, while waiters moved between tables carrying plates worth more than some families spent on groceries in a week. That evening, the restaurant welcomed Gregory Whitmore, a self-made billionaire whose technology company had transformed his fortune from millions into billions. But Gregory rarely arrived alone. Beside him was his 19-year-old daughter, Charlotte, a beautiful young woman known throughout elite Boston circles for something completely different from her father's success. People called her impossible. Hotels had asked her to leave. Private schools had expelled her. Therapists had quit. Nannies had refused to return. Even experienced security professionals admitted they could not predict what she would do next. Gregory had spent years trying to help his daughter, but every attempt seemed to make things worse. After the death of Charlotte's mother, Grace, when Charlotte was 14, something inside the girl had changed. She stopped trusting people. She stopped sleeping normally. She became terrified whenever strangers touched her, and whenever she felt overwhelmed, she reacted with anger instead of fear. Gregory responded by surrounding her with professionals, expensive treatments, private tutors, and security teams. He gave her everything money could buy, except the one thing she secretly needed most: someone who would stop treating her like a problem that had to be fixed. That evening, the waitress assigned to Gregory's table was 24-year-old Hannah Brooks. Hannah lived in a small apartment outside Boston and worked 2 jobs while quietly saving money to finish nursing school. Her father, Joseph, had been a factory worker before an injury left him unable to work full-time, and Hannah had learned early that dignity was not something money could purchase. She had waited tables long enough to recognize different kinds of customers, but the moment she saw Charlotte, she noticed something others had missed. Behind the girl's anger was fear. At first, everything seemed calm. Charlotte barely touched her food and kept staring at the restaurant's crowded dining room. Every time someone laughed loudly, her shoulders tightened. When a server accidentally dropped a fork nearby, she flinched violently. Gregory noticed but said nothing. Then a waiter approached from behind to clear an empty plate. Charlotte suddenly pushed the table away. The glass fell. A chair scraped across the floor, and within seconds she was standing, trembling, shouting, and trying to get away from everyone around her. The restaurant staff panicked. Gregory immediately signaled his security team, but Charlotte became even more frightened when 3 large men moved toward her. She backed into the wall, breathing rapidly, her eyes filled with tears. One security guard reached for her arm, and she screamed. The entire restaurant watched as Gregory pleaded with everyone to give her space. But nobody seemed to know what to do. Then Hannah stepped forward. Instead of approaching Charlotte quickly, she stopped several feet away. She lowered herself so they were closer to eye level, and placed the glass of water on the floor between them. She did not touch Charlotte. She did not tell her to calm down. She did not call her crazy or difficult. She simply sat down on the restaurant floor, even though the expensive marble beneath her uniform was cold and dozens of wealthy customers were staring. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then Hannah quietly picked up a folded paper napkin and began making a small flower with it. Charlotte watched. Her breathing remained uneven, but her eyes followed Hannah's hands. The waitress continued folding the paper, slowly and patiently, as if there were no audience and no emergency. When the flower was finished, Hannah placed it beside the glass of water and moved back again. Something changed. Charlotte stopped shouting. Gregory stared in disbelief. The security guards exchanged confused looks. Nobody moved. Hannah noticed that Charlotte was still frightened, so she pointed toward the quiet corner near the restaurant's windows. Charlotte hesitated before slowly walking there. Hannah followed several steps behind. What happened next surprised everyone. Charlotte sat near the window and began crying. Not the angry tears people had seen before, but the exhausted tears of someone who had been holding too much pain for too long. Hannah remained nearby without forcing her to speak. After several minutes, Charlotte finally reached for the paper flower. That tiny gesture broke something inside Gregory. He turned away, covering his face with one hand. For years, he had believed that giving Charlotte more protection would keep her safe. But watching Hannah made him realize that his daughter had never needed another guard. She needed someone willing to see the frightened person beneath the behavior. Over the following weeks, Gregory asked Hannah to continue working with Charlotte, not as a therapist, not as a servant, but simply as someone Charlotte trusted. Hannah agreed on one condition: Charlotte would never be treated like a broken person. They began with small things: breakfast without crowds, short walks, drawing, folding paper flowers, sitting silently when words became too difficult. There were setbacks. Charlotte still had difficult days. Sometimes she became angry. Sometimes she refused to leave her room. Hannah never expected overnight miracles. She simply stayed consistent. Slowly, Charlotte began returning that trust. One morning, nearly 6 months later, Gregory entered the kitchen of his home and found something he had not seen in years. Charlotte was sitting at the table, preparing breakfast for someone else. Beside her were dozens of paper flowers. She had made one for every person she believed had helped her during the hardest year of her life. Then she handed one to Gregory. He broke down. It was not because his daughter had suddenly become perfect. It was because she had finally begun living again. Years later, Gregory would tell people that the most valuable lesson of his entire life did not come from a business deal, a financial advisor, or a billion-dollar investment. It came from a young waitress who sat on a restaurant floor and showed his daughter that she was not a burden. Hannah eventually finished nursing school, and Charlotte became an advocate for young people struggling with grief and emotional isolation. Their lives took different directions, but they never stopped sending each other paper flowers. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness still matters, and subscribe for more stories that remind us that sometimes the smallest act of compassion can change an entire life. And before the story ends, comment: kindness changes everything. If you believe nobody should be judged by their worst moment. Because sometimes, the person everyone else has given up on is not asking to be rescued. They are simply waiting for one person to stop judging them long enough to see the pain behind their behavior. And sometimes, that one person may not be a doctor, a billionaire, or a powerful expert. Sometimes, it is simply a waitress with a paper napkin, a patient heart, and enough kindness to stay when everyone else walks away.